You ever meet someone who just sees everything? Like they're sitting quietly in the corner at a party, not saying much, but you get this weird feeling they know exactly what's going on. They caught that awkward glance between your friend and their ex. They noticed when someone's smile didn't quite reach their eyes. They saw you check your phone 3 times in 5 minutes. But they don't say a word. They just observe. And honestly, it's a little unsettling. Because here's the thing, these people aren't just paying attention. There's actually a deep psychology behind why some people notice everything but choose to stay silent. And maybe, just maybe, you're one of them. Let's talk about the first type, the protector. These are the people who notice everything because they're constantly scanning for danger. Not like actual physical danger, though sometimes that too, but emotional danger. They grew up in environments where reading the room wasn't just a skill, it was survival. Maybe they had unpredictable parents. Maybe they learned early on that if they could spot the signs, the tone shift, the tension in someone's shoulders, the way a conversation suddenly went quiet, they could brace themselves for what was coming. So now, even in safe situations, they're still doing it. They're watching. They're calculating. They notice when you're upset before you even realize it yourself. But they don't say anything because, in their experience, speaking up often made things worse. Silence became their shield. And here's the twist, they're not judging you, they're just prepared. Always prepared. Then there's the analyst. This person notices everything because their brain literally won't let them stop. They're the ones who remember that you mentioned your sister's birthday was coming up 3 weeks ago. They caught the subtle change in your speech pattern when you talked about your job. They noticed you've been wearing the same jacket 4 days in a row, but they're not creepy. They're just wired differently. Their brains are constantly processing patterns, details, connections. It's like they're running a background program that never shuts off. And they stay quiet because they've learned that most people don't want to know how much they notice. They've been called too observant or overthinking it enough times to realize that their level of awareness makes others uncomfortable. So they keep their observations to themselves, filing them away in some mental archive. Maybe you're this person. Maybe you've sat in a meeting and noticed 17 different micro expressions but kept your mouth shut because you knew no one else was tracking it. You're not showing off. You're just existing in a world that feels overwhelming with information. But here's where it gets interesting. There's another type, the empathetic observer. These people notice everything because they feel everything. They're tuned into the emotional frequency of every room they walk into. They can sense when someone's faking happiness. They notice when the energy shifts. They pick up on the things people don't say, the pauses, the hesitations, the way someone's laughter sounds just a little forced. And they stay silent because they're processing all of that emotion. Speaking up would mean confronting the weight of what they've observed, and sometimes that's just too much. They're the friend who texts you later saying, "Hey, are you okay? You seemed off today." Not because they're nosy, but because they genuinely can't unsee what they saw. They carry other people's emotions like extra luggage, and silence is their way of managing the load. If this is you, you probably feel exhausted after social gatherings. Not because you talk too much, but because you absorbed too much. Then there's the strategist. This person notices everything because information is power. They're quiet because they're calculating. They're the ones in a business meeting who don't speak up immediately but later come back with a perfectly timed observation that changes the entire conversation. They notice who has influence, who's lying, who's insecure, who's bluffing. And they stay silent because they're waiting for the right moment to use what they know. This isn't manipulation. Well, not always. It's just strategic thinking. They understand that speaking too soon can dilute the impact of what they've noticed. So they wait, they watch, they collect data, and when they finally speak, it lands with precision. You might know someone like this. Or maybe you are someone like this. The person who seems detached but is actually 10 steps ahead. And finally, there's the self-protecting quiet. These people notice everything but stay silent because they've been burned before. They spoke up once, pointed out the elephant in the room, called out the tension, mentioned what everyone was ignoring, and it backfired. Maybe they were called dramatic. Maybe they were told they were making things awkward. Maybe people got defensive and turned on them. So now they notice just as much, but they've learned that sometimes the cost of speaking is higher than the cost of staying quiet. They're not weak. They're not passive. They're just tired. Tired of being the one who has to say the hard thing. Tired of being misunderstood. So they keep their observations to themselves and let the world unfold without their commentary. And honestly, that takes its own kind of strength. So here's the question, which one are you? Are you the protector, always scanning for threats? The analyst, drowning in details no one else sees? The empath, carrying everyone's emotions? The strategist, waiting for the perfect moment? Or the self-protecting quiet who's learned that silence is safer. Maybe you're a mix of all of them. Maybe you shift between types depending on the situation. But here's what's important to understand. People who notice everything but say nothing aren't hiding. They're not broken. They're just operating on a different wavelength. And in a world that's constantly noisy, constantly demanding reactions, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is observe, to see, to understand, and to choose your words carefully when you finally speak. So tell me, do you recognize yourself in this? Which type hits closest to home? Because something tells me you didn't click on this video by accident. You notice things too. You just don't always know what to do with what you see.